everyone. Happy New Year. We're back. It's Josh and Darren Make a Movie.
Happy New Year. So excited to be back.
We are back here at the Chandler Studios.
Yes, we are.
Thank you, James Michael Bobby, for allowing us in our nonsense back in your space.
We love being here.
Josh, how was the holiday?
Holiday was amazing. I got to see family. I went to Cincinnati, hung out with my kids. It was really, really nice. How about you?
It was good. But I will say, being in my house, and Josh, let's just, again, we want to be real here. There was a moment that you stopped by my house and didn't walk in the door. Why didn't you walk in the door, Josh?
I walked up in order to pick something up from your house, and I heard screaming inside, people yelling at each other, and I was just like, all right.
And that was us getting along. That was like an us getting along day.
I texted him, and I was like, dude, I'm outside.
I'm not coming in.
I'm not coming in.
That's how most people, when they walk by our house, it sounds like a Saw movie at all time. It's crying and screaming. I just want to give a quick 2-minute recap for those that are just joining us, so you're not missing anything. I'm Darren, and this is Josh, and we're going to make a movie with you along for every step of the way. The idea behind this entire podcast was we wanted to pull back the curtain and show you the warts and all of what it takes to get a film made. And over the last season, how many episodes did we do?
27, I believe.
We talked to a variety of people. We talked to actors, we talked to producers, and we kind of was trying to demystify the process a little bit of what it takes to put together a film. And so, it started off very early on when we met with Dead Meat James and Hannah, and we wanted to figure out what subgenre of film we wanted to make. And then we started there, and then from there, we kind of picked a lane, and we started meeting with Shawnee Smith and Lauren Levera and Tobin Bell to really figure out what that movie was. And we came down with 2 ideas. One of the ideas we're going to go out, full-on pitch, put together, package, and try to get financing for. And that's going to be called, and we've changed the name a little bit. Are we okay with the new name?
For now, yeah.
Killer Icons, with the I and the S in a different font. So it'll be Killer Con with an I and an S. And I'll come back to that in a minute. And The Privilege, which is going to be something that's spec'd out, written, and then hopefully we can sell. So we're going to take you on the journey of those 2 projects. But we're focusing right now on the one we're going to pitch, and so much happened during the holiday. So we decided to take a pause because we were working on some guests, and not to bury the lead, because if you're watching this episode, you know that we have the icon, the legendary, the great Robert Englund on. But we wanted to get caught up, so we weren't rushing to make these episodes. But so much seemed to happen in the 1 month that we were down in a forward kind of momentum on this thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah. The episode that's next week was us pitching to a producer. And we'll wait to announce that until next week. But it went really well, and he seemed to really respond to the idea. And over the last two weeks, Darren and I have been trying to put together an outline and a pitch document.
Well,
and
so much of it though came from the conversation that we're about to have right now with Robert. So, coming up with this concept, if you're talking about the horror Expendables. So much of it to me is about getting those Expendables. Like when you look at Stallone's Expendables, those were the action stars that I grew up on.
Yeah.
You can't have a movie about the horror Expendables without, I think, the grandfather of them all, which is Robert Englund.
Yeah.
And so it was so important and critical for me, if we were going to try to do this thing, to get Robert. And it took a little. He
was side texting all the time with Robert's wife.
Oh man, it was so. Oh. Ironically, the producer of 11-11-11, my opus, My Citizen Kane, his family has been in Robert's life since Nightmare on Elm Street. The Rices, Wayne Rice, who is the producer, has done a ton of movies. You should look him up. We should have him on sometime. He's great. His brother was an agent, and his other brother built my house. And so Wayne produced, and I did not know any of them. So I had Wayne Rice, who was the producer of my movie, and then we hired another Rice to do our house. And he was like, "Oh, you might know my brother Wayne." I was like, "I produced a movie of mine." And then his other brother was an agent of Robert Englund. So I was able to call upon the Rices to get me with Robert.
Amazing, yeah.
But I think what's great about what Robert did, and he kind of. He's a talker, and I think that I had a conversation with him first, kind of just to tell him what I wanted. I bet that phone call that I thought was going to be like a 3-4 minute phone call was an hour and a half.
Right.
And I was like, we're going to pitch you an idea. And
Like, stop talking. You're telling stories. I want to hear these stories on the show.
I felt like he had listened to our podcast because he was pitching back ideas that I've said to you.
Yeah.
But what I found incredible about this whole thing is that after we had this conversation with Robert, you and I went back and forth again and again and again because it just kind of opened up what this thing could be that we weren't thinking about.
Yeah. And over the course of the last 3 weeks, we've come up with, I think, a really great twist. That
oh my God!
It's going to be really tough not to reveal. But we're not going to be able to. But
I know.
So excited.
About 2 weeks ago, I sent Josh just like a 1-pager, and I said, here's kind of what's in my mind. And it wasn't necessarily a story. It was the way that I wanted to tell it. And I really want this to be meta.
Yeah.
I think that if you're leaning into people playing themselves in this world, the way we pitch it needs to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you took that document and you're like, this is great, but we don't have the story here. Like, where's the twist? And then you texted me that 2-sentence what the twist is. I high-fived myself. The twist is pretty awesome. Because a movie like this needs to be more than just the gimmick.
Yeah.
And I think that you really figured something out, which we're not going to tell on the podcast. This is one of those things that we are going to keep. But it gave me...
You never know. There might be a small group of people that wind up getting into the club. You never know. On some Patreon down the line. You never know.
Yes. So have you seen anything over the holiday that we need to talk about? Has there been any new content that you have watched?
I saw a movie that you're going to laugh at and you're going to be like, I don't have no interest in that. But it was one of my favorite movies of the year, Hamnet.
Laura wants to see that. I had no desire.
It's gorgeous, man. It's so pretty. It's just, I literally weeping at the end. Like weeping.
I went and saw Marty Supreme.
Okay.
And have you seen it?
Not yet.
Oh my God, my favorite movie of the year. It's not a horror. I hate to use the word. A lot of movies that I consider horror or horrific are not horror films. Like Requiem for a Dream to me is a horror film, even though it's not.
Yeah.
I felt that with this movie. It is such an assault on the senses, and you are on the edge of your seat, and you're watching people make very bad decisions.
Right.
And it's so well done and so good. And and that's one of the best kills in a movie that I
awesome. All right.
A good friend of mine, Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller, name dropping, is in the film, and he is responsible for a grisly death. And I texted him afterwards, and I was like, "Fuck you for having the best death in horror." It's pretty great. I highly recommend that. That was fantastic.
That's awesome. It's funny because the studio seems to be putting out their publicity campaign does not lean into that vibe at all. They're like all feel-good movie.
I had no desire to see it. I was like, I love the actors in it, but I did not want to see a ping pong movie.
Yeah.
And yes, there's ping pong in the movie, but that's not what the movie is.
Yeah.
It's just one of those movies that it's visceral and it imprints itself on you, and it's loud and bombastic, and the acting is phenomenal. It's great. I can't say enough good things about it.
How was Odessa?
Amazing. She was fantastic.
Oh.
Laura loves her from LA.
I love LA. Yeah.
She's great.
She was in Kids in America. She was about that little. She was like 7 years old in Kids in America.
Really quickly, speaking of movies that we saw, I want to start a new segment. I don't know what, I go down the YouTube rabbit hole and I just watch obscure movie reviews.
Yeah.
We have so many people that are helping us make this thing.
Yes.
I want them to come on in 90 seconds, 2 minutes, review a movie that maybe is not getting the light of day that it should be.
I love it, and you guys are in for a treat because our crew are awesome. All of their personalities are off the wall and fun and crazy. I can't wait to see what they do.
Dude, we have Robert Englund today.
I know. It's... why are we waiting? Let's get to him.
I gotta do a little teasing beforehand. Something I didn't get a chance to say to him on the podcast, which I'm gonna say to him now, and hopefully he watches this. When I was a kid, I had a little TV in my room, and my parents wanted it off every night at 8:30. That was a rule; it had to be off at 8:30. And I remember I snuck it on twice a week after that time to watch two shows: Night Court and Freddy's Nightmares. And what was so cool about Freddy's Nightmares, it was not a great show at all, but it was one of my favorite types of shows, which is the anthology thing. But it had Robert Englund that brought the DNA of the Freddy thing in there as the Crypt Keeper.
Yeah.
And I fucking loved it. And it felt taboo for me because I knew I shouldn't have been watching it. My parents did not want us to watch it.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
It was a great show. It was an absolutely great show. He was never in any of the episodes, though, was he?
He was. He
I mean,
opened the
like,
no, I don't think so.
He was the
narrator. He was the narrator.
Yeah.
He was the narrator of it. But it was so surreal to sit and talk to him, because the impact he's had on not only my career, and I'm sure yours, but it's like you feel his claw marks, his knife marks over so much of horror.
Yeah.
And it's he talked to us about our movie.
Yeah.
Let's just stop talking about this right now. Let's take a listen to someone much wiser than us, Robert Englund.
Yeah.
Josh, I'm we're gonna start, and I'm geeking out. I mean, look who that is.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin. Darren and Josh make a movie.
Robert, so I talked to you on the phone, I don't know, a few weeks back, and I told you on the phone, we've been doing this podcast now, I think we're on episode 27. Your name has come up and been on every single episode of this podcast.
Talking behind my back, Arnold.
Yeah. There's been a lot of, and your name has come up with every guest. We talked to Tobin Bell about you for quite a while, who's a fan. So it's like you've been part of this podcast from the very beginning. So thank you.
Well, I'm envious of Tobin. He's such a wonderful actor. And I was a big fan of his pre-Saw. And I know Tobin managed to land himself in the Vanity Fair article about character actors, along with Brian James, two actors I loved. And I'm always been envious of both of them for that.
You guys have both done such incredible work in horror, and furthered our love of horror. So it's crazy to be sitting here. I was just at a con last week or 2 weeks ago, and I met somebody who, it was crazy. Your name came up. It's the people making the new Pinocchio film,
Pinocchio Unstrung.
Yeah, Reese and Scott, they're good friends of mine, and I was so happy to hear that you were doing their film. That's really fun.
Well, somebody dropped the ball for a while, because I told people I was involved, and then I didn't hear back. But then I realized the whole process with those films is so time consuming. But I finally got into the sound booth, and did my sort of Jiminy Cricket from hell.
I actually read that you started in theater, and wasn't Pinocchio like one of your first stage shows as a young adolescent?
It's my very first paraprofessional role. I was in a teenage drama workshop, and the ages were 12 to 18, and I was 12 and a half, going on 13, and I thought I was going to be sweeping, the stage and perhaps ushering. I was accompanying a dear friend of my mother's daughter, who was a wannabe actress and like maybe the third most beautiful girl in the history of the San Fernando Valley. Legs that started right under her armpits. And I wound up auditioning, and I was Pinocchio, and I was Aladdin, and I was Hansel and Gretel and Peter Pan, and I got in everything. Snow White, I was the head dwarf. I know we're not allowed to say that anymore. The head little person. But anyway, it was this amazing secret, because in those days, people didn't talk about being an actor or being a musician or being a dancer. Everybody was supposed to be an engineer or a lawyer, and so it was kind of my secret life. But because everybody was older than me, I had, when I was 13 and a half years old, I had friends with cars. And back then, in the terms of adolescence, to have a friend with a driver's license that could cart you around when you were 13 years old and go on dates and things was really a great accomplishment. So I was sort of accelerated in my maturity because of that. But I looked like I hadn't hit my growth spurt yet. I looked like a cross between Danny Kaye and Harpo Marx. I was this funny looking kid. But I had 16-year-old girlfriends, that smoked cigarettes and picked me up in convertibles, and it was kind of a magical time.
That's incredible. And what was your way in? Was all through theater? What were your first roles that you were really excited about playing?
Well, yeah, I did a lot of the clowns in Shakespeare. I did Lancelot Gobbo, Shylock's servant in Merchant of Venice.
Amazing.
And I starred in A Comedy of Errors as Dromio of Syracuse, which was later the musical Boys from Syracuse, with Eddie Cantor and all the people back in the 1930s. But no, I did a lot of the clowns in Shakespeare. But my huge breakthrough, I was in the first professional company, I believe, full equity. We'll say that's the union. I was in the first full equity production of Godspell. And of course, there's a huge dragnet of alumni from that show, whether it was Marty Short, or Gilda Radner from SNL, lots and lots, Victor Garber, lots of people were involved with that show over the years. And it was just, I literally had groupies that were nun novitiates. They were like, they were in the convent studying to be a nun. If that's, I'm not sure. I'm not a Catholic. I'm not sure how you describe that. But they all girls liked a bad boy, and I was playing Judas. And I literally had nuns. I had been on a radio show in Cleveland talking about what my favorite poison was. And the girls literally were bringing me 12 packs of Michelob and leaving them in front of my door in Cleveland, So it was little nuns with the short hair, like, little, 18-year-old, 19-year-old Julie Andrews from the Midwest. It was very strange. And it was a hit, sold out for 3 months every night. And that was really my first sort of taste of stardom. I'd signed autographs before intermittently, and I'd had some starring roles, but that was sort of like being on a runaway horse.
That's so crazy. So Godspell, that means that would you fancy yourself a singer?
No, I don't. I'm a terrible singer. And I mean, I can, now that I've had the pleasure of working with great microphones, I can sing a couple of bars on key. But back then I couldn't. But I had been a trumpet player in my childhood. And if you know anything about the play, Judas begins the entrance of the play. He stands in the back of the audience in the aisle, and he blows the Jewish shofar, the horn from the temple, the Jewish temple. And no one could ever blow it. Well, I could, because I still had my leftover lips from being a trumpet player, and I was a surfer and a trumpet player, so I had a lot of air breath control, and I could really get that wonderful strange sound coming from the back of the theater. Then I had to sing. They just let me sing about a bar and a half of the opening lines, and I barely got those out on key. And then the rest of the kids on stage joined with me, thank God. But I was terrified, and I thought I was going to vomit every night, because I had to blow the horn and hit those first 5 or 6 notes before the chorus joined me on stage. But I also had a moment where I got to, Judas betrays Jesus with the 30 silver coins. I had a moment where I was on the edge of the stage, right by the audience, flipping a coin. And I remember like an old George Raft gangster movie where he did that. And I think they do it in the Stanley Donen musical, The Bandwagon. I think Fred Astaire has a kind of a gangster dance number in that with Sid Charisse, and there's a whole thing with the flip coin. And I was flipping it on the edge of the stage, Judas the bad boy. But I also had a full 4 electric guitar, 2 basses, girl singer, and drums, percussion, piano, underneath me, playing a sort of Godspell, a musical interlude as I flipped the coin. And to this day, it's one of the most powerful moments I've ever experienced as an actor. 'Cause, that what's that phrase? You could hear a pin drop. It was just the sound of the coin slapping my hand until the music came in. And God, it was fun. I mean, I wish I could sing and I wish I could dance, because when you have that music underneath you, I did that old warhorse of a play, Fantastics, which is one of the longest running plays in New York, if not the longest running play, and has some hit songs in it. I did it in Detroit, but we had the harpist from Motown, from the Motown Orchestra. And there's most people can't afford it when they do a production of Godspell, but we actually had enough money to employ in our pit orchestra, which was very minimal, amplified electric harp, and who would like play along, had this score to play along with us. And literally you would cross the stage to music, to your own little beat that the harp would play, just strumming this beat every time you moved. And that was incredibly intoxicating too. So the people that work in rock musicals and rock stars and Broadway musical stars, I have a little bit of insight into what that feels like and that power. And let me tell you, it feels great. I must be like what being a stand-up, it feels like when you're really on fire.
I'm going to pause the podcast for a second. This is my request to you. Stop right now. Look below you. I want you to hit comment. I want you to say some shit. I don't care what it is you say. We have to serve the algorithm. I want you to like and I want you to subscribe. Will you do that for me? All right, great. Here you go. Back to the podcast.
Yeah. Do you know what's crazy is my entrance into the entertainment industry was through Jesus Christ Superstar, which was the first thing I was cast in. So before I was a director, I was an actor. And then 20 some years later, I got to cast Ted Neely, who was the original Jesus from Jesus Christ Superstar, into a rock musical I made. And so, it's crazy. The Godspell. How old were you when you did Godspell?
Well, just a little parenthetical here. Those are my people. When my first time in New York, I stayed with Paul Ainsley, Herod, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Barry Dennen.
Barry Dennen was in that movie too. Oh my God, Barry Dennen showed
Barry. And one of the harlots, who we love so much from Sons of Anarchy and Futurama and Married with Children.
Yes,
it was just a strange group of people that were all friends then, and that Superstar, I've seen it a dozen times in New York. Teddy was great, and Paul and Barry, and I think Teddy and I clashed over a guest star on Starsky and Hutch. That's how far back I
love Teddy. He did a surprise for me. So I'm the biggest Jesus Christ Superstar fan. Like outside of this room, my house has all of this original Jesus Christ Superstar art. And he came in to do a movie with me. And he knew that I loved Jesus Christ Superstar. And we were casting this very small cameo. And he's like, I got a friend that might want to do this. Do you mind if I bring a friend? And I was like, Ted, you can do whatever you want. And in walks Barry Dennen to say one single line. I geeked out harder than I've ever geeked out. And like I shriek at the top of my lungs. And I'm like, it's Barry Dennen.
Barry.
Yeah, he was great. So was this high school or were you out? Or was this like professional theater?
Oh, no. I had hitched a ride to New York for my first series of auditions. And I had friends who'd already, they'd arrived there before me. I was working at a theater, the Meadowbrook Theater, outside of Detroit, in Rochester, Oakland County, and wonderful theater, all English, all the Brits from the Royal Academy were there working, and the faculty and a lot of people from Stratford, Ontario. But my first time in New York auditioning, I already had friends there who were in Superstar, and I had a friend in Hair, and I had a friend working off Broadway. And so I got that, I crashed on couches, and that's how I met everybody. There was a bar on 8th Avenue that they used to all hang out at. I can't remember the name of it. It's long gone, I'm sure.
What was the transition for you from theater, being a theater actor, into dipping your foot into film?
I really was young and naive when I was in the theater. I was a professional at 21 working in regional theater, and I really thought that the theater was this sacred place. And I had been kind of a snob for a while about doing all new plays and the avant-garde and anti-war plays and political plays. And then I became obsessed with the classics for a while, and I've done Moliere, and I've done Shaw, and obviously Shakespeare. Ibsen, all professionally. But I got very disillusioned with some of the politics I encountered in theater. Not Washington politics, just the politics of casting and who's directing and the casting couch and everything else. And so I came back home. I'm, LA boy, and I know it. I knew LA really well. I'd already had, several apartments in Los Angeles as a young guy. And I came back and literally immersed myself, tried to save a marriage and immersed myself into going to movies for about a year because my whole framework was theater, and I was really obsessed with all the new playwrights in London and New York and I idolized Sam Shepard and Edward Albee and everybody. And I was with this group of people, many of whom had been out at Valley College. I went to a different school, but we was a strange group. They had all been friends. Michael Richards, I think Ed Begley Jr., I think Richard Dreyfuss, a whole bunch of them. And I was seeing a girl then, and she and my other roommate in Hollywood would go on to write Lost Boys, which was my title. My idea for a title.
All right.
And, but they had been nurturing that idea for a long time. And, that was just sort of the world that I was in then. And then about a year in, 9 months in, sleeping on a couch in Hollywood, I'd had an agent who'd seen me in, Hello Dolly. What's the source material? Matchmaker by Thornton Wilder. The source material for Hello Dolly. And he'd signed me, and I went on my first interview and got a starring role in a film called Buster and Billy, 1973, starring, and he was at that time the #1 actor in America. He had 2 hits out. His family hit was The World's Greatest Athlete, and his adult hit was The Mechanic with Charles Bronson. Nice. And it was Jan Michael Vincent,
oh my God,
who was arguably the best, the handsomest, most beautiful man in the world.
Yeah.
He looked like, an airbrushed James Dean, and sweetest, nicest guy. And so I starred with him in a movie for the great director Daniel Petrie, who had done, among other things, A Raisin in the Sun.
Yeah.
And all the fabulous black actors were discovered for that film. And that was sort of their entree into Hollywood for many of them. Not Sidney Poitier, but a lot of others. Lou Gossett Jr., Ruby Dee, a lot of other wonderful actors were in that film. And Dan's a Canadian and the whitest guy in the world, but he directed that great film, Raisin in the Sun. So I went right into a starring role my first time, and I was sort of typecast then throughout the 70s as a best friend or a buddy or, what I call the sidekick roles. And many of them were Southern, and I had only played one Southerner in my life. But, and that was a Tennessee Williams play. But I think back then I bore a resemblance to Nick Adams. And he'd done a television series called The Rebel. He also co-starred in Rebel Without a Cause, and Picnic, the great, William Inge film. But I did sort of, and I reminded people also of a young actor who was on one of the big Western television shows and had done a couple of other big series, a kid named Randy Boone. And so, it's sort of a Dukes of Hazzard thing and his appeal. And for some reason, that's how Hollywood saw me then. And so I was playing a lot of sidekicks and best friends, and pals. And I sidekicked Jeff Bridges and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Henry Fonda and Dennis Christopher, Peter Strauss, lots of people back in the 70s.
This is in probably late 80s. When was V?
Friendship is universal. Or is it?
The V Saga.
V was early 80s. Yeah, I remember I did a movie, my first overseas movie, and then I came back from the Philippines, and I think I did a guest star or two, and then we had just done the original miniseries.
Yeah.
There was a huge hiatus between the miniseries, the second part of the miniseries, and then the series. And the only thing that fit in my schedule was Nightmare on Elm Street. But yeah, so I think I began V in 82.
Well, I read a story, and that probably goes with it, that you weren't even in the country when Nightmare on Elm Street came to you, and there was a reluctancy about even going back. I mean, when did that call happen? When were you called in for Nightmare on Elm Street?
No, that was in the hiatus from V.
Okay.
And it was the only thing that fit in my schedule at that time. And I had been hanging out on La Brea. I think it was called Blackie's, North La Brea, right under Sunset, between Santa Monica Boulevard and Sunset, and west side of the street. And it was sort of this punk rock dive bar, but it had pretty good music. And there was a little tiny Sinead O'Connor punk rock bartender girl. I had a little bit of a crush on her. And they had 2 monitors on either end of the bar, big, heavy duty metal shelving, industrial shelving. And then they had a couple of Sony TVs in there and video apparatus. And they had a sort of continuous loop of David Lynch's Eraserhead in one of them, selected highlights. And then in the other one, it was selected highlights of The Hills Have Eyes and Last House on the left.
Oh, yeah.
And it was in black and white. They weren't in color. It was just black and white, like you're watching it on a black and white TV. And I would go in there and drink, a day drink, and flirt with the little punk rock bartender and watch the evening band come in and set up. And I had this sort of vision of Wes Craven as a kind of goth David Lynch guy, real dark. And so I was very curious to meet him when I got the interview. I did want to do it because of him. And I had read the script, which was wonderful. The script for 1 is all Wes. And then the script for 3 is also, it's Bruce Wagner and Wes and Frank Darabont, Shawshank Redemption. And they kind of read like Stephen King novellas, especially the stuff between the dialogue. So I was intrigued. And also, I think way down deep, buried back behind all of my kind of snobby theatrical pretensions, I had this memory of being a child who was obsessed with horror movies, fantasy and science fiction. And in fact, it's behind me here in a stack. Howard Berger, the makeup effects guy, found it for me. But there was this coffee table book that my godfather had. And in it, full page spread, were little tiny postage stamp size photos of all the different makeups that Lon Chaney had worn.
Oh,
and of course, we're all familiar with his, that he put things to extend his nostrils for Phantom of the Opera. But, he did, I think it was Zanzibar or something. He played a blind guy, and he boiled an egg and took the shell off, and then carefully took the placenta off the outside of the egg and put it over his own eye to make his eye look milky and dead. This is it. This is like silent films, to look blind. I mean, the first contact lens, right? So I was obsessed with this book and all the different makeups and the whole section on horror. And then, of course, being a kid, and doing sleepovers, in your old Sears sleeping bag with the hunter shooting the pheasants out of the sky on the flannel lining and lying around with those big buckets of popcorn, stale popcorn, and somebody's parents were out of town for the weekend in Tahoe, or in Palm Springs, so you'd go over and get in trouble, and we'd watch the Late Late Show, and obsess with all of the early 50s horror, which I remember seeing The Thing and Invaders from Mars, and what's the one with the giant ants? Them, yeah. And the OG Frankenstein and the OG King Kong without, there were commercials, but they were unedited then. I mean, I remember seeing King Kong squish the little child, the foot shot of him squishing the child. And I think I think he fingered Fay Ray. I'm not sure, but pretty sure I saw. Maybe that's just in my fantasy selection of my memories. But yeah, I mean, it was. I mean, I know I saw her nipples, so it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been that. You know, when she was wet and dropped by the pterodactyl. But anyway, no. But this was that stuff. I was, and the more what I'm telling you now. You guys, I swear to God, it's only come back to me in the last 12 years or so. I'd kind of like buried it, but I remember all of those sleepovers and all of those films and how much I loved them and how much they meant to me in mowing lawns so that I could go to see the Saturday matinee at the Lorena Theater in Studio City or talk somebody's mom into driving us to Westwood, you know, to see a movie matinee. And yeah, so I really was a fanboy. You know, a legitimate fanboy, but I'd kind of buried that under my attempt to be the guy in a turtleneck and a corduroy jacket, you know, doing Shakespeare. Well, you know, all the theater actors were sleeping with those ballerinas and ballet girls, and you know, yeah, we.
You want the Sinead O'Connor?
You know, what is? Yeah. What does Bo Hopkins say in American Graffiti? You know, every boy wants to be a pharaoh. Well, the car club, and it's sort of like, well, with in my generation of actors, we all wanted to be serious actors, and we all wanted to date ballerinas, you know, ballet girls, because they were so beautiful. Until you realize they all had cats with the same name, and then it was like, whoops, time to get out of here.
You said something that I think is a huge thing that I'm going through now. And this is a question. I'm going to record it on my phone just so I can show this to my wife as well. I had you meet my son. He came in before this. I am struggling with my wife because I grew up on horror. And I can remember the very first horror movie that I ever saw was Last House on the Left. And it has such a profound impact because it was the first time I can remember being disgusted by something, being horrified. And that imprints itself. It goes inside your head and you don't forget it. So here I am in my mid 40s now, and I can still go back to when I saw Last House on the Left the first time. So my son is about, I'm not going to tell you all these now. My question to you is, when do you think is the appropriate age for a child to see Nightmare on Elm Street? So I'm going to record this.
He and his wife had a big fight about that.
Okay, so no, don't let him answer the question. When do you think an appropriate age to expose someone to these type of movies are? Because to me, it defined my childhood in a good way. So and it sounds like it did for you as well.
Well, you know how they say 40's the new 30 and 50's the new 40 and things like that? Your kid's 12, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, 12's the new 20.
There you go. So I think 10, 11 years old is when they should start watching Nightmare on Elm Street because...
Yeah, he's definitely over the bar mitzvah line for adulthood. So
You heard it.
Yeah, so he's a lot. I mean, I think I mean, there's stuff he probably, you know, shouldn't see or be told he can look away from. But that's in all kinds of movies, whether it's Silence of the Lambs or whether it's Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which I think is fine. You know, and then you should probably give him the book to read, you know, or at least an adaptation of the book because it's a little dense. But yeah, I think you can open the door at 12. Definitely. Okay. You see, the thing about the Nightmare on Elm Street, and this is a quote I've exploited from Bob Shea, the head of New Line Cinema for years, but it's a cautionary tale. It's a warning, and it's the thing in adolescence, the loss of innocence that eventually everybody in adolescence has. You know, life's not fair. You know, there is evil in the world, and it's the first time you might confront or see or witness or hear about legitimate stranger danger as opposed to a sort of sanitized, you know, second grade lecture in school and the news and everything. So all of that stuff, I think, I think all of that's going on in the Nightmare films. They're a bit of a dark fairy tale and a warning about what's out there in society and civilization. And I think at 12, he could handle it.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how those are the movies that impacted me the most. You know, I go back and I think about growing up, and I don't remember the dramas or the comedies or the action films, but I can tell you where I was when I saw Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. I can tell you where I was when I saw the first Nightmare on Elm Street and the second and the third, yeah, because I think that there is something so visceral and real that stays with you. And I think that they are cautionary tales and they scare kids into knowing things that, you know, it's easier to learn through a movie than your parents constantly barraging you with these things. This is another thing. I don't know if it's legend or true, but I read somewhere that the voice of Freddy came from a bully of yours. Is that correct?
No. It's real. I was just having a makeup test done at David Miller's little house deep in North Hollywood. He used some of the money he'd made on Thriller for a down payment. He worked with Rick Baker on Thriller, and I'm sitting out there in an old, scavenged barber's chair in his garage. They'd been converted into a makeup studio, and we were on the third or fourth test, I think. And I'm looking in this mirror, and David had these very expensive Japanese makeup brushes for painting detail into the foam latex prosthetics, but they get kind of hard and crusty with the medical adhesive, the colostomy bag glue that we use between the prosthetics and my own skin. And he poked me, and I was looking in the mirror, and admiring the makeup, and we were kind of offering opinions about the makeup. And I think I just said something like, "Damn it, David." And my throat, it was kind of a guttural. I talk like this. This is Robert Englund. But I went, "Damn it, David." Because he poked too close to my eye. But I saw that makeup. I saw the Freddy makeup in the depth of the mirror with that voice. And I went, that kind of fits. And so I began to play with that a little bit. And you have to remember, back in Nightmare 1, Freddy wasn't as talkative. He had a couple of one-liners, and he talked both on camera and off, but he wasn't a chatterbox. And but when he did, I was able. Now, I talk a mile a minute, but I learned pretty quickly that because they wanted to put a little bass into my voice, and because they did this thing called vari speed, the old disc jockey trick on your soundboard. If I talked fast, it came out just right. So if I said, "I'm your boyfriend now," it comes out, "I'm your boyfriend now." Because they're slowed it down a little bit and it's a little deeper. So I kind of, figured that out. And they played with my voice a little bit on the first one, perhaps the second one too. But by the time we got around to the third one, they didn't touch it. That's all me. It's always all me, but it's me sometimes enhanced.
Well, you had a movie you were in as well, not the first few Nightmares, had a huge, profound impact on me and where my career went, which was Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. And to me, I bring that up a lot in interviews, because Josh and I were talking about this exact idea in the car last night. I think as I've gotten older, it's become harder and harder to scare me as I become so desensitized to the news, to extreme horror films. But New Nightmare got under my skin in such a way because it was meta, and it broke the idea that Wes Craven is Wes Craven and Robert Englund is Robert Englund, and that movie really fucked with me, and it eventually has made. I do another profession where I do theater full time. I do immersive theater, which is where we do a lot of line breaking and meta and things like that. And when people do interviews and ask where it came from, I'm like, it's a New Nightmare. To me, it allowed me to be scared again in a movie, because I was like, wait, Robert Englund is Robert Englund and Wes Craven is Wes Craven. It was such a ballsy, cool to me rebirth of that franchise. So I just had to say thank you for that. I fucking loved that.
Well, a lot of that was a Valentine from West to the audience, because West was having mixed emotions then at his incredible success and the fact that it was a result of the world of horror and the support of horror fans and general audiences as well. And so Wes West did it as a kind of Valentine for the fans. It was almost, his meta is a way of saying, we know that you know what our tropes are, but we're still going to get you. We're still going to unbalance you and scare you. And it was also an examination of the kind of morality of horror. And you guys know it with the Saw success and everything, but that sort of morality of, I owe some of my success to this dark, violent world, that we depict. But when you realize that horror has been around since the dawn of cinema, since early science, there's a really early Frankenstein, I think, made in the teens, perhaps even earlier. And a Nickelodeon, and because it's been around so long, it's right there with the gangster movie, the Western, which are not extinct, but which are sort of out of the mix right now, not the horror movie, and the same, and now the rise of science fiction and fantasy, of course, is the big news.
Yeah. And not only that, but going back to your start, I mean, Shakespeare, that's some of the bloodiest story. Yeah. I mean, just severed heads and killed babies stuff. And 100%. Yeah.
There's incest. Shakespeare has incest in it. It has all sorts of stuff. The cross-dressing, the ambiguity. It's playing with all kinds of things. And, there's several of his plays. There's nothing left on stage but dead bodies. Hamlet. Yeah.
Well, I flew to the Globe Theater when I heard they had remounted Titus. And that's one of my favorite of all Shakespeare's play because it is so dark and uncomfortable and horrific. And I read in these reviews that people were passing out in the theater. I was like, there's no fucking way. That is hype. And I wanted to go to the Globe Theater for a long time, so I went. And it was shocking. The level of disparity and violence and bloodletting in that show was fantastic.
It's part of catharsis. Boy meets girl, boy meets boy, whatever. But violence, fight scenes, sword fights, getting speared, getting killed with a dagger, being suffocated. Othello suffocating Desdemona and her little feet kicking, and I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff that's part and parcel, all the way back to the Greeks, of the menu and the recipe for what makes drama.
Yeah. Well, wait, I've got a question that goes back to something. Yeah. Just want to go past it. When you look, we've all made lots of movies over the course of our careers, 100 years between all of us here. And being on a set, you just never know. Like a movie that you're shooting that you absolutely love turns out like crap. What was your feeling on that first film, on the first Nightmare film? Was there any sense that this was magic, or was it just luck?
No, it is strange what you just said, because no one sets out to do a bad movie. Sometimes you're doing a low budget movie, or you're doing a movie with a weak script and it's a great idea, or maybe it's a weak idea but great dialogue, or you do it because you want to work with somebody that's directing it, or you want to work with the other actors that are in it, or just you want to go to Paris, and do a movie in Paris. But no one sets out to do a bad movie, and you always are doing your best and trying to. But with Nightmare 1, we literally ran out of money, and I think they had to give up the video rights to get the money to finish the film.
Wow.
Heron Entertainment or Smart Egg or somebody came in and helped. I was protected from all of that because by the end of the shoot, it was pretty well known that V was a huge international hit, and my character had really taken off, and I was getting tons of fan mail already. So they kind of, I don't want to say they deferred to me. I certainly was not making a big salary or anything. And I didn't have special billing, but they kind of protected me from this, the running out of money part. But I knew we were on to something special. I just felt it. I knew Ronnie, and I knew Ronnie's work. in Nashville. I knew Heather looked like a little bite-sized Brooke Shields then. Brooke's quite tall, like a model, and Heather's petite, which as a male is just makes her more accessible to you. You're not as intimidated as you would be meeting Brooke. I not only did Wes's daughter, but my girlfriend at the time got one look at Johnny Depp and said, and this is my girlfriend at the time, discovered a lot of people. She was a Yaley director, and she discovered a lot of the people we watch today all over television and movies. And she saw Johnny Depp, and in 20 seconds, she said, he's going to be a star.
Yeah.
And I think Wes's daughter threatened to leave home or to run away if he didn't cast Johnny. But also John Saxon and a certain sense of Hollywood gravitas that he brought to the part. And the other kids, and we all knew who Amanda was. She was the sacrificial Janet Leigh character. But everybody had a sort of, if you didn't know Amanda Wiss's name, you still knew that Amanda was a famous actress because of Ridgemont High. She'd done a lot. She hadn't done Silverado yet, but she was around. She was on TV and movies a lot. And oh my God, she's dead so quick. He dragged her across the ceiling. I knew that the ceiling sequence was magical, and I could tell that the cameraman Jacques Heitken was special. And I remember the day we realized we have to light for Freddy. This was the first week. I think we can't. I would step into the lighting of the ingenue and the juvenile, Johnny or Heather or someone who was lit glamour, and it wouldn't work. So they had to light for Freddy and because those kids are so beautiful anyway, let them step into my lighting. And I remember and Jacques Heitken had figured that out within 72 hours. And because they were very, very worried about the makeup and how it would come off. And so all of that went into my feeling that we were onto something special. The art department, and the certain of the set dressings and the playing with perspective and things good. As you enter a nightmare. Yeah. I was aware that the frame around me was a bit surreal or a bit exaggerated, or there was props and things on it that I hope would be seen. And I would wear there's an old expression, wearing this set. And in that movie, Enter Laughing, with Rennie Santoni, a great old film, Jose Ferrar. Jose Ferrar plays the old actor that, and he wears the furniture. But yeah, so I wore the set a little bit. Whenever I saw something cool on the set and we were doing a blocking rehearsal, I tried to lean up against the wall next to it just to get that into the frame too, paint it into the picture if it was a little bit surreal or different. I knew we were onto something. My only wish, though, was that people would see it, because it's the first time I'd worked low budget. Nightmare on Elm Street. I was an A-list actor. And people forget, B movie doesn't mean bad. It doesn't mean less than. B stands for budget. That's what the B in B movie stands for. It's the other movie on a double bill. And people today forget that for 30, 40 years, when you went to the movies, you got to see two movies. It was a double bill. Two movies. And the back half, the 10 Commandments and Last House on the Left, the back of the double bill was the B movie, the budget movie from RKO or Universal or somewhere. And so that was my first B movie.
Well, it's become the A horror franchise, and kind of the pinnacle for, geeks like us, is that we'll sit around a bar for hours and just talking about the impact that film has had. And not only that film, but that character. And I think that even in some of my less favorite of the nightmares, the character of Freddy Krueger became such a conversation piece. And, you can't have a conversation with a horror person without talking about the impact Freddy Krueger has had. And that's the main reason that I want to talk to you right now. And I'm going to pivot right now about why we really want to speak to you is, outside of haunting our nightmares, which you've done, you have made. First off, congratulations on the Walk of Fame. We should have started with
that. Oh yeah, dude! Congratulations! That's so cool.
Thank you.
You have, you are the iconic. When I think, if someone says, think horror movie, what do you think of it? And to me, it always goes to Freddy Krueger. And Josh and I, and the purpose of this podcast that he started is, we want to take an audience through the making of a horror movie, kind of pull back the curtain and show them in real time what it goes into making a movie and what it goes into making a horror film. And for the last few months, we've been pitching ideas back and forth, and we finally landed on 2 ideas. And one of the ideas that the audience has kind of voted on that we're going to move forward with, I talked to you about it for a minute or so on the phone, but now I would love for 2 purposes. Pitch you the idea a little bit and pick your brain as the guy who basically changed horror. And that is the idea that Josh and I are working on right now is we are going to make a movie set in the world of horror cons, which I find so fascinating is that I've gone to a few of them, and to me, it is such a universe in and of itself. You have all of these people that are iconic. So the last one I went to, I was sitting next on one side of me, Cassandra Peterson, who was an adolescent growing up in Kansas City. She was my, and I told her this, so it's not a bad thing. Like, I found, it was the first woman crush that I ever had. I'm 10 years old, and I'm seeing Elvira for the first time, and that was my kind of gateway into horror. On the other side of me, I got Method Man from Wu-Tang, and it was this insane, and then down there I had Kane Hodder, and over there was Doug Bradley. And I'm like, oh my God, like these are, outside of Method Man, these are the people that have defined my trajectory. And I'm like, it's so interesting to put a movie here. But, and I know you've had this idea as well, is that I want to do our version of Horror Expendables, which have been tried before. People have kind of dabbled in the, let's put horror icons together. But I want to do it in a much more fun, self-aware, basically take a group at a horror con where a terrible thing takes place and they have to be themselves to save this con. So you have Doug Bradley, not as Pinhead, but as Doug Bradley. You have Kane Hodder, not as Victor Crowley or as Jason's, but as Kane Hodder. And Kane Hodder with the bad knees and joint problems and all of this. And you have the king of them all, the whale of all of them, Robert Englund. What happened is a terrible, horrible thing takes place, and these are the ones that we have to rely on to save the day. Not Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund. Not Jason, Kane Hodder. I think that would be a very fun for fans, and it would be violent, it would be vicious, but it would be fun as well. And, I know when I talked to you about it on the phone, you immediately, I heard your voice light up and you then just started throwing out ideas. You're like, oh, I thought about this, and this. And I was like, you got to come on the podcast.
Well, I think if you were to have, we can't get Tony Todd now, God rest his soul. But if you were to get Kane, and Doug and myself or others, there are others, Tobin.
Yes.
But I think the trick would be for us to portray an exaggerated conception of ourselves.
Yeah, I was
just
saying
slightly,
that. Yeah, 100%.
Just slightly exaggerated. Maybe Doug Bradley is also a fussy gourmet or a vegetarian, and maybe he's always drinking tea, and even more British than we think he is, and maybe Kane has got a bigger temper, and because his joint pain, and his sacroiliac is bothering him, and his neck is stiff from a stunt he did 10 years ago, and it's acting up because it's cold out, and everybody and maybe I take myself a little too seriously. Maybe I'm a little more pompous than I already am. And then the idea is that what is the jeopardy? This is what's so important, the jeopardy. And one idea I'd had years ago before my wife had a great idea also about this. We were both influenced by how much we loved Galaxy Quest.
Oh yeah.
But one of the ideas that I'd had, and I think it was a script that had been sent to me, I'm not sure, But or I maybe perhaps it was it was a con I was invited to, and this was in the back of my head for a long time because it sounds like a horror movie. There somewhere that they have the Isle of Man and the Isle of Wight, the tax havens off the English coast, and I'm sure there's equivalent ones off of Italy. We know there's some islands off Greece, but it would be one of those cons that's a special meet and greet with the celebrity actors. A weekend. You spend a weekend with us in a fabulous old castle in Ireland, on an island or on the coast, or Orkney or the Isle of Man or the Isle of Wight or somewhere, or Sardinia. And we're all there and something goes terribly wrong, hence your jeopardy. And we begin a kind of, it could be a 10 Little Indians with us, with the success of Knives Out and everything.
Yes.
Or it could be a 10 Little Indians with the fans. Now, the trick is you have to write some really wonderful, great fan roles. And you decide how far you want to push the envelope with comedy. You probably have a Jack Black fan, right?
Yep.
Or you go gentler, nerdier, stranger, a little Timothy Chalamet fan that's obsessive, and maybe he's our killer. We don't know, but you have to set the tone, get everybody on the same page, and then decide, and then deconstruct it that way. That was my original idea, and I think there was a ferry boat involved, from the shore. So you get an action sequence to this island, and it was an old manor house or an old castle. My wife's idea, later on, running off this same riff, was that all of us had brought in our signature. This would be more comic, but still could be dark and violent. We all brought in our signature original weapon. And maybe you'd even have somebody playing, or, Mark Hamill, or you could get Mark, but you'd also have Doug Bradley's box, the box from Hellraiser. You'd have the machete, you would have, all the various emblematic signature weapons that we have, Freddy's claw, different things. And there was going to be an auction for Make-A-Wish or something really benign and wonderful. And they are all mounted in plexiglass and everything, but they're ours. They're the ones custom made for us. The ones that we use, they belong to us. They're very, very valuable for us. We use them in the movies. We also like the fact that we just lucked into getting a prop given to us by somebody in the prop department that's now worth $50,000 or $100,000. And there's a heist at the con. And together with our collective neurotic personalities, we all have to find, the Holy Grail of horror weapons. That was sort of my wife's thing, and how that would be solved, and, how violent that would be, and who would be the perpetrator. Would it be a jealous other actor? Would it be a jealous old leading lady, that hasn't worked since the late 70s or 80s, who thinks she's been betrayed, or, there's a lot of ways you could go. But you'd have to plot that all out. Get those 3x5 cards out, Josh.
Right. That is what for you just right. It's almost like, you are in our head, because with some of the stuff that you mentioned, like, I always love this mix of Galaxy Quest meets Three Amigos set in the horror world. So, Three Amigos, they go and they show up to this town, and the town believes that they're going to save the day, but they're just actors. And the idea that these exaggerated versions, and in every episode of this podcast, I've used you as the example, and please, Josh didn't want me to bring this up, and I don't care. I'm saying it. I just love this idea that there's always that guy that I've noticed at the convention who is the King Kong, the A-lister they brought in, that he gets to show up late. He gets the flight assistants bringing him coffee, giving him whatever. There's that first class ticket. And I just love this idea that we start this the movie up and we're meeting the other one. We're meeting the Bill Mosleys. We're meeting the Adrian Barbeaus. We're meeting the Doug Bradleys. And then we see them, get in line to get on boarding group B. And we see them like, sorry, sir, your bag's too big. It's got to go to check-in. And then all of a sudden here comes Robert Englund in with a scarf and his latte. And excuse me, I'm a first boarder. And we see you like, in the first class as Kane Hodder is having to walk past you over. And so we set these exaggerated versions of these people up in the drama. So by the end of that, before that inciting incident, we already see there's friction between these people that are iconic horror people, but they're also catty and they're people as well that like you said, Doug Bradley always has to have a T. He's sure has a certain T. And, I think that there is something very...
What's this bloody Lipton shite?
Yeah, exactly. And he won't sign until the right T comes to the fucking table.
But I think to delineate it, I think it would be even more wonderful if you put, let's say your leads, you put all of us in first class. We've been around. And then you have fictional characters that walk by us. The guy that wore the alien outfit,
right.
The guy that, the little person that played E.T.,
right. Right.
You have them and they glower at us, and whatever the inciting incident is at the con that binds us together that we have to go solve, we get our comeuppance to a certain degree because of whatever the inciting in, and so you do have the scene where I walk in the room and I go, "Are you fucking kidding me? There's no cable, no room service, barbaric, But you that kind of stuff is wonderful to play, but I don't know if you want to do a class distinction between your leads because then that's the banter all the time. And in fact, if you basing it in reality, nobody feels that way, among actors. But there are people that they're the flavor of the day.
Yeah,
the new kids, and Doug Bradley, lights a cigarette and says something. It's like he goes, "They made another goddamn. What's the one, you guys? He goes, those goddamn Final Destination brats are here."
Yeah.
So that we set that up. Something new. Did you see the car that picked up the Demon Slayer bitches? That kind. So it's all of us because we're older against maybe the younger and the new, and we make them fictional. We don't say Demon Slayer, we say, the monster killers, and we don't really say Final Destination. We call it, some equivalent, so that we're playing with that, so that people know it, but we make it fictional. But everybody knows what we're talking about. Just like everybody knew in Galaxy Quest, we were talking about Star Trek.
Right.
And I think we can be us. We can be extensions of our own personalities, And if there's any legal problems, you make Bradley's a famous general's name, so you make him Doug MacArthur, and you make me Robert London, and you make Kane, you make Kane something like Keanu Hawthorne or something, you give him some funny name. Yeah. But I mean, that's all legal could fix all of that. Yeah. I just think you have to really set your template and your jeopardy. And I think that's the hardest, because once that's nailed down, I think the dialogue and the incidents, they grow from that.
One thing that you just mentioned, which I love, is this idea of the new versus the old, because the truth is that, like, when I think of horror icons, they're all from the 80s and early 90s, late 70s. But like, other than Art the Clown, which is like a new superhero, and who?
John Kramer. He's newer.
But even John, yes. But like, the last 10 years, there's the
Mayan share comes from the Nightmare on Elm Street. It comes from the Hellraiser. It comes from the Friday the Halloween. Halloween.
It also has to stand the test of time. I think Bill Skarsgård is going to stand the test of time. I do. And there's a lot going on there, not the least of which is the contribution of Stephen King and his and Bill's talent.
Yeah.
But there's others, that are not, and we could also tease, I think you tease the new a bit, and that's partly our own insecurity and jealousy. Let the actors play that.
Yeah.
And let the other people, some of them be nice, and let some of them be complete assholes like we are. Let some of the kids be selfish and vain and bad. And Robert Patrick was telling me this story. And there's I don't care how anybody works. There's lots of ways to act, and there's lots of ways to prepare, and there's lots of ways to perform, and it's whatever works for whatever role. But a lot of and I understand people have stuff fed to them in their ear, whether it's direction or whether it's lines. But I've also heard about young actors that have the earbuds in and they're listening to their acting coach, and that's throwing the rhythms off with the other actor, whether he's on camera or not. It's a very strange new thing that's happening. And I know there's a time and a place for it, but there's certainly a time and a place where the other actor should have a vote in that. For years you've heard about like you don't ever get in Robert De Niro's eye line when he's acting, and you heard this story about, I'm forgetting the actor's name. He was one of the Batman. I'm just forgetting his name now, but he got in trouble for yelling at somebody.
Christian Bale, yeah.
Yes, and I know people that worked on that movie and said everybody wanted to yell at that guy. That guy didn't know the etiquette.
You brought us to think about, which was the old versus new. And I had this really crazy moment that was a surreal out of body experience. And I know Mick Garris. You've been on Postmortem. I got invited to the Masters of Horror dinner when I was 25 years old. And I remember when I walked in to that first dinner, it was Eli Roth and it was James Wan and it was myself and it was Ty West. And then across from me, there's John McNaughton and Wes Craven and all of Joe Dante. And everyone was amazing and so nice and great, but we felt like these young bucks coming into these titans, these pioneers of the horror genre. Now, at the last Masters of Horror dinner, I felt like the old asshole, and these work kids are coming in, and I realized there was a resentment. And I realized now that when we walked in 20-some years ago to that dinner, so I think there's also something really cool about that, which you just mentioned the Final Destination thing. Yeah. You have these pioneers of the horror genre that created these iconic supervillains. Now you have these single serving, and by the way, I love Final. I'm not, So I think there's something interesting there, but I think the most important thing for Josh and I is you can't do a movie, make a movie, create a movie without a Robert Englund and the contributions you have done to this genre. And not only that, but I followed your career, and I love when people share stories about meeting you at cons. And everyone across the board is how giving you are, how amazing you are, which Josh and I talking, you have to have stories. You have to have stories about your time through the years at cons. And I think you are a Wikipedia of things that we should pull from, which leaves me, what has been your most memorable con experience? And I mean something not like a great interaction with a fan, but have you had a nightmare thing occur at a con where something goes wrong, something goes awry, or a very intense experience with a fan, you're like, whoa?
Well, I wear the claw in photo ops, and that way it's just a taste. It's just a taste of Freddy. And it's me. So you're having your picture taken with the actor who plays Freddy Krueger, the actor Robert Englund. And yes, he's got the claw on, and I can hide it when they want, me to be from other movies that I'm in. I can just put the hand behind my back and I can be Robert Englund, the actor who's been in one, I've done 100 movies and 4 television series. So I've got fans from a lot of other stuff. And about 1 out of maybe 8 or 9 want that photo opportunity. But I have people that are so frightened of me that they want to meet me to get over their fear.
Wow.
Or they were so scared by Nightmare on Elm Street as a child, meeting me, and I don't know this. They're just coming in to take a photo with me now. They're just the next person in line. But for them, it's a therapy. You know, it's been suggested to them as a therapy thing, or it's a personal quest over a therapy, or they're just so excited. And what happens is the claw, I'll have my arm around them, or I'll display the claw on their shoulders, or I'll pose with it, a la Freddy in a famous photo. But they get so nervous and that they almost run into it or stab themselves. And I wait a lot, but a lot of them love having the real one, you know, and it's great. And I have still enough actor's dexterity that 99 and 9/10 of the time I'm ahead of any of them. But every once in a while, or someone will just rush in to hug me or kiss me, and I've got the claw, and that can hurt them. And so that's one kind of thing that happens. That's strange. And the other is I get real intimate confessionals when I'm signing from all the people that first encountered the Nightmare on Elm Street experience on VHS. And that generation now has lost a father or a mother, sometimes an older brother, a stepfather. And their memory of Nightmare on Elm Street also includes that lukewarm pizza on the coffee table, and pausing the movie and rewinding it. And it also includes, dad putting steak knives on his fingers and scratching the screen outside the kids' room, all kinds of stuff like that. But now that dad is gone. And so they need to tell me this. It's really important that they share this with me. And sometimes people completely break down. And it took me a while to remember and realize that we were the first truly huge VHS phenomenon, Yeah. The films just timed out perfectly right into the DVD generation. And that so many people saw it that way, where they could pause it and rerun it and rewind it and pause on an image and study it and play it back to back and play 3 and 4 together with the overlapping cast, but also with their mom and dad who are now gone. And so I get so much of that now. You can see how old I am. You can imagine my fans, some of them back in the early 80s, how old they are now. And so I deal with that, which is a very human and a genuinely wonderful, but also sad thing. And that's one of the things about the con that I learned and really made sense with about 10, 12 years ago. And it's important to be, I always have to be ready to play that button, to be able to play that square, because you don't really always see it coming. And I've had people break down in my arms, and break down at the table and break down in the photo op because of that. And it's really important that they share that with me, because they have to finish the grief. And that's the most surprising thing, I think, at the cons. That I've got stories about fabulous cosplay girls in Sweden, and I've got stories about parks in Tokyo. There's a park in Tokyo, a cosplay park with Japanese young men who look exactly like James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause, who look exactly like Elvis Presley, who look exactly like Prince, and I hesitate, but I wouldn't call it darkface. They're not doing that. It's something else. It's on a higher level because their aesthetics are so high. They do George, the guitar player from oh my God! My Dream Warriors, the rock group, because he's a guitar god in Tokyo still, and his '80s look is their idea of perfection. The tight leather pants and that, shag haircut and his posture. They do Michael Jackson. Perfect. I mean, it's a level of perfection and imitation as flattery. That's real. But I've seen people come. I mean, I'm signing away and I'll look up and there'll be a perfect Freddy or a perfect Nancy from the film, or a girl in a body bag with a worm coming out of her mouth, like Amanda Wyss in Wes Craven's original Nightmare, and it's real. It's a wonderful homage, but it's also kind of shocking, the thoroughness and the degree of professionalism that you encounter. I stopped judging costume contests because kids from a drama department in the Midwest had done, Lord of the Rings, the fairies, the blonde.
Yeah.
They had done an entire tribe of them in distressed, faded, acid-washed, velour, custom tights with leather stitching on the seams, handmade leather fairy boots. The hair was perfect. The elbow patches mismatched, wonderful old-time leather. The jewelry, everything was perfect. And they wouldn't let me award them first place because they were in a drama department, from some costume. Why not? It's about the best costume, right? They're the best. They're not professionals from Hollywood. They're from the Midwest. And it was like, it's that the level of devotion, of fan devotion and love is incredible, let alone, and I know this is especially true of people that have, older franchises than I do, but I know this is true of a lot of the Star Trek stars and Star Trek actors, but the absolute amazing knowledge they have of episodes and metaphor and symbolism and stuff that a lot of the actors can't remember because it all merges for us.
Every time somebody comes up to me in a con and they'll ask me a question, like a detailed question about what happened in the middle of, they know so much more than I do. It's crazy. I want to let him, he's been on for an hour and 15. I'm going to wrap this up with really, I want to address something he just said. I'm going to put something on the screen right now. I think my experience of these franchises, and this goes true for Gremlins, it goes true for Critters, Nightmare on Elm Street. Back in the 80s, there was an experience of going to a video store with my father and going and just judging on covers. You would go and you'd see box. And it was a ritual. So we would go and we'd rent Nightmare on Elm Street, and then you had to put it in. It was the manual labor. It was the ordering of the pizza. It was a ritual. And I remember one of my most core memories as a child was when I was 9 years old, 10 years old. I went as Freddy Krueger, and my dad, who had no idea what the hell he was doing, trying to make me look like a burn victim. And I ended up looking stupid as hell. And I remember going to school and people would just laugh at me. But that memory is like, it pushed the love out of. I'm going to put it up there. For me is Freddy Krueger.
But it was an effort. It's an effort.
It's the effort. It is that manual thing that you have to do. And I think that helped ingrain yourself in these amazing franchises. Josh, any parting things that you would like to say or questions you would like to ask for?
I'm just really, really thankful that you took the time to hang out with us today.
Addison, come say hello. Our producer, Addison, say hello to the great Mr. Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund.
Hi, Addison. Well, listen, any friend of Wayne Rice's is a friend of.
Well, thank you. Wayne Rice did my movie 11-11-11, and that was how we got to. And you know something else funny about Wayne Rice? His brother, Daryl, built my house, and his other brother, who recently passed, lived at the end of my street. So I
know right where you live then.
Yeah, I'm right by the house.
I'm there all the time. Yeah.
Well, next time you knock on the old door, 2 doors down from. But I just said that. I'm going to beep that out on the podcast. But, as a final parting thing, I want to say this. the movie that we're going to make is a love letter to the stars that we grew up on and the icons. When I was a kid, it wasn't about sports stars for me. It wasn't about politicians. It was about actors, and it was about characters that defined me. And, that is why we want the Doug Bradleys and the Robert Englunds and the Kane Hodder's, because you kind of created us. And I know Eli, the same for him. Like, you were so impactful to us. This is our love letter, to that kind of thing. And it's not possible without you. So you're not done hearing from us yet. We will be back with a proper pitch and a script with you, because we think this is a movie that can't be made without you, because you are so integral in how it came to be.
Well, I've been a judge. I've been a judge at several film festivals around the world, and that's a great gig. It's really a wonderful gig. They treat you great. You stay in a nice hotel. The only problem is you got to start watching movies at dawn. But I've met wonderful people. John Landis. But I was on the jury for over a week, and had these wonderful 3-hour lunches every day to break up the movie going with Christopher Lee.
Oh my God.
And some of the great Japanese horror directors, lots of wonderful people. But Christopher warmed to me, and I actually had him pledged to do a film that I was going to direct in Italy. And Christopher once said that, and this is a thing that I've done too with directors, but I love this, that he recognized in horror the inherent storyboarding of imagery, and so he knew, when to live up to that sort of storyboard frame, that beat, that moment, and I've used that too. You kind of see that sometimes, or you anticipate it, or you realize after the first week of shooting or so that this is what your director's building to, that moment, and it's not just a single, with a chain hanging down, or in Leatherface's case, a hook with a slab of meat on it. But it's also going to be in the trailer.
Yeah.
It's that, it's the end of that page of storyboarding. It's being built to. And I remember we're talking about that. And I remember how I invested that, in the 90s into my work after that. But he wouldn't talk that much about horror and about Dracula, because he just talked so much about it. And, there's only a limited amount of questions before, you're repeating yourself. And but he wasn't that he disliked it or he disliked Hammer. He just had sort of said everything there was to say about those years of his life.
Well, it is truly an honor, and be prepared to be on set with us soon. Right, Josh?
Yes, definitely.
And thank you so much. Thank your lovely wife as well, who set this all up for us. We will be in touch. And again, congratulations on the Walk of Fame.
Oh.
And for keeping us all in love with horror and everything you created. And we didn't get even into the questions from the Mangler. I had a 50-question thing from that. We love you.
Ted Levine, the great Ted Levine.
Yeah, that really, my last comment. I love how, obviously when people see Robert Englund, they're going to say Freddy, but you've done so many other amazing, I brought up but from, Phantom of the Opera to the Mangler to all these other crazy things.
Well, everybody should see The Rise of Leslie Vernon Behind the Mask.
That is,
it's a great film for fans.
One of my favorite. I've talked about that on the podcast as well. It's one of my favorite kind of off-center serial killer thing. You got this documentary of a dude who's it's amazing.
But it's meta within meta.
It is. Yeah. We'll put a list of all of our favorite not nightmare movies of Robert Englund. You got to go see.
Oh, it's all right.
In 2001.
Well, put last showing on it.
Mr. Englund, thank you very much. We appreciate you. And
happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays,
everybody.
Thank you. See you
all right.
soon.
Get out that eggnog.
So thankful and happy to have Robert with us. Thank you, my friend. And we look forward to hanging out some more because we're making a movie together, dude.
I know. It's so, it's just so surreal. I mean, he is the guy.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because I feel like we are collecting Pokemon cards right now with these icons. You know, Robert Englund feels like we've just captured the most insane person we wanted for this, but all of these people now that we've from Tobin Bell to Shawnee to Danielle, it's incredible.
Yeah.
You know what Robert brought up, and he brought it up on the phone call as well to me, which I wish I would have recorded. I did not realize I was going to be on the phone with him for 2 hours. Is he really was challenging me and us to think outside of just the con world. And he was like, you know, he's right. I mean, for those that have done the cons or been to them, they're in convention halls. A lot of times it's carpeted floors, it's fluorescent lights. It's not glamorous. And if you're making a horror movie, you want it to have look, you want it to have style. And the problem with a lot of these cons is that the visual style is very generic.
Yep.
And he was really pushing me to think outside of that cons can take place and go anywhere. They don't have to just be on a convention floor.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was talking about that idea about, you know, doing it elsewhere, a mansion, a cruise ship, something like that. And I was like, oh shit, I wasn't even thinking about that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think also came to light over the holiday break, and speaking to Robert as well as a few others, they're going to be upcoming on the podcast, is the window or the doorway that we now have into those communities and those fandoms, because I know the Saw world. I was around from the very beginning of House of Jigsaw, and there's a diehard loyalist community of them, and there are in-jokes and there are Easter eggs that only a Saw fan would really appreciate or know. Every one of these franchises, Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th, they have their own Easter eggs, and I think these icons of horror can help us bring these Easter eggs into our movie. So you're not just servicing horror community or Saw fandom, but you're servicing the die-hard Nightmare on Elm Street fans, the die-hard Halloween fans.
And in saying that, I feel like if you are a member of that community, either on Reddit or Discord or any of those things, please get your
Tentacle. I think it's great that we're going to be able to pull into the fandoms of Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and service the fandoms with their Easter eggs and their homages. And we have the guys and women who made these movies to kind of help us through that process.
100%. But let's not forget that we want that fan base of those amazing films. Like I was the Halloween crazy fan base before Saw. We want the friends from Freddy Krueger and from Hatchet, from all of these other films to jump in here and help us find those moments, those key things.
Yeah, so maybe, you know, if you're listening to this, I'm sure you are ingrained in the horror community. What tropes do you love about those movies? What Easter eggs? You know, I know that there are jokes. Like both of us did the Dead Meat Christmas special, and there's this ongoing joke about slow-ass Jeff from Saw 4, that Jeff, played by the amazing Angus McFadden, is very slow. So every time he appears, slow-ass Jeff. Like, what are those in Halloween and Hellraiser and Halloween, you know, all of Friday the 13th? And let's figure something out to do with those.
Yeah. I need the cold, dead eyes. A killer's eyes. You know, what's his name from Halloween?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I wish he was still alive.
Donald Pleasant?
God, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's so cool. He's so cool. Oh,
we'll get there. But listen, everyone, we are back, and we're going to be moving very quickly now. I'm excited for you to kind of hear our pitch as we move forward on what this thing is kind of morphed into since last season. Next week, we have Mark Berg. Let's just say it. We have Mark Berg, the producer of the Saw franchise. And you will hear Josh and I working out the pitch in the room. And it's already improved tremendously from what we did then. But you'll hear in real time Mark's kind of reaction to listening to us.
Yeah, 100%. Looking forward to it.
All right, everyone.
Here.
We'll see you next week.
Peace.